It was supposed to be a relaxing camping trip with my friends, a chance to get away from the hustle and bustle of the city and immerse ourselves in nature. We had chosen a remote location deep in the woods, far from civilization, where we could really disconnect and unwind. But as the sun began to set on our first night in the woods, I began to feel uneasy. There was something about the darkness that seemed to press in on us, suffocating and thick. The rustling of leaves in the wind, the creaking of branches, and the chirping of crickets only added to my sense of unease. Despite my misgivings, my friends were in high spirits. They laughed and joked, telling stories around the fire as we roasted marshmallows and sipped beer. I tried to join in, but I couldn't shake the feeling that we were being watched. As the night wore on, my friends grew tired and began to retire to their tents. I stayed up a while longer, staring into the flames of the dying fire, trying to calm my nerves. But as I lay down in my tent and closed my eyes, I realized that my unease had only grown. That's when I heard it. A low, guttural growl that seemed to reverberate through the woods. It was followed by a series of grunts and snorts, like an animal in distress. My heart pounding in my chest, I sat up and listened intently, trying to identify the source of the noise. But before I could make sense of it, there was another sound. Footsteps, heavy and deliberate, crunching through the underbrush. My blood turned to ice in my veins as I realized that the footsteps were getting closer. At that moment, I knew that something was very wrong. I fumbled for my flashlight, trying to turn it on as quietly as possible. As the beam cut through the darkness, I saw movement outside my tent. I can't describe the fear that coursed through my body as I saw the massive creature standing just outside my tent. It was huge, easily over 7 feet tall, with shaggy brown fur covering its entire body. Its arms were longer than any human's, and its hands ended in sharp, claw-like nails. But the most terrifying thing about it was its eyes. They glowed in the darkness, a bright, fiery orange that seemed to burn into my soul. As the creature stared at me, I felt a primal fear take hold of me, like I was facing something that was beyond my understanding. For what felt like an eternity, the creature and I just stared at each other, frozen in place. But then it began to move, its massive body lurching forward as it let out a deafening roar. I scrambled out of my tent, trying to get away from the creature. But it was too fast, too strong. It reached out with its massive hand and grabbed me by the shoulder, pulling me back towards it. I remember the smell of it, the stench of wet fur and decaying flesh. I remember the sound of its breath, hot and fetid against my face. And I remember the terror that gripped me as I realized that this creature could easily crush me with one swipe of its massive paw. But then, something strange happened. The creature seemed to hesitate, as if it were trying to decide what to do with me. For a moment, its grip on my shoulder slackened, and I saw a flicker of confusion in its glowing eyes. In that moment, I realized that this creature wasn't just a mindless monster. It was a living being, with thoughts and emotions that I couldn't begin to understand. And somehow, that realization gave me the courage to act. With all the strength I could muster, I wrenched myself free from the creature's grasp and stumbled backwards. For a moment, it seemed like the creature was going to pursue me, to finish what it had started. But then, it turned and lumbered away into the darkness, disappearing from sight. I collapsed onto the ground, gasping for air and trying to process what had just happened. It felt like a dream, or a nightmare, something that couldn't possibly be real. But the scratches on my shoulder and the smell of the creature's breath were all too real. In the days that followed, my friends and I debated what to do. Should we report our encounter to the authorities? Should we try to capture the creature, to prove that it really existed? In the end, we decided to keep our encounter a secret, to keep it between ourselves. The world wasn't ready for the truth, we decided, and we weren't ready to face the consequences of what we had seen. But even now, years later, I can't shake the memory of that night in the woods. I can still hear the sound of the creature's footsteps, still feel the weight of its massive paw on my shoulder. And I know that, whatever it was, it's still out there, lurking in the darkness, waiting for its next victim. As I finish telling my story, I can't help but wonder what other secrets the woods hold. What other creatures are out there, waiting to be discovered? And what other terrors are waiting to be unleashed on an unsuspecting world? Only time will tell. But one thing is certain, I'll never forget my encounter with Bigfoot, and I'll never be the same again.